My name is Tiffany Fitzgerald. I am a third-year law student at Elon University School of Law. I am the BOSA president, co-president. We actually have two presidents. My co-president is Chanel Edmonds, and she's also in the audience. I was asked to share briefly some words of advice or encouragement, and I have a little different perspective than anything you've heard so far. I'm a non-traditional law student. So I went into undergrad in 2004 at the Alabama State University in Montgomery, Alabama, the civil rights capital of the world. And I was in the top 5% of my class. I had a daughter. Things changed. I got married, worked a job I didn't plan. And from the time I would have graduated to the time I should have been in law school was 5 years. I entered law school, and I'm telling you this to tell you that I've met a couple of you who are non-traditional law students. And even if it feels like everything's not geared towards you, even if it feels like the situation in law school is going to be so different for you because you're not as young or you have children, you can do it. Get connected, believe in yourself, trust your process. Your life is actually designed for you to be very successful at what you're going to do. And that's all I'll say about that. So I have the pleasure of introducing today Miss Yolanda Young. She is a journalist and an activist. She contributes to the USA Today. She also is the CEO and founder of Lawyers of Color. And she has written a book, she's authored a book, should I say, on our way to beautiful. Thank you.
So I should say everything that you have heard rings true to me, and this is a very tough act to follow. I'll tell you a few more things about me that like rounds out my story. So I was a member of the Georgetown Law class of 1995, and Georgetown has reduced its class size since then, but it was at the time the largest law school in the country, and they had about a 10% African American population, student population. So we had a critical mass of black people within the school and within my class. There were about 62 of us. And so I, had thought that I would be a traditional law student, but I ended up, I had this desire to write. And shortly after law school, I got a book deal with Random House for $250,000, and I thought I was on my way to being the next Maya Angelou. And so I didn't do the traditional track of going into a law firm as an associate, and from that time I was always a bit of an outsider. So I didn't get active in the any of the local bars, which you all should do, by the way. So I took another track. I became a journalist, and I also founded Lawyers of Color. But I have to first tell you how it is I came to start Lawyers of Color. So as I said, I took a detour into the practice of law. After I ran out of my $250,000, which by the way did not take as long as you might imagine, I started doing what they call contract law legal work or attempt legal work, as I tried to figure out like what I was going to, what my permanent job would be. And I was recruited to go to work for one of the top law firms in the country, Covington and Burling. Well, in my heart of hearts, I am a journalist, and I'm always, and as an outsider, I'm always looking at things from a different angle. And I couldn't understand why Covington had created a group of attorneys. There were over 100 of us who were not on partner track. We were, they called us staff attorneys. And that name is tricky because at a company, a staff attorney is a person who is eligible for promotion, etc. So to make a long story short, in 2007, I sued Covington for disparate impact on behalf of our class the class of black attorneys who, by the way, many of the people in this particular non-track group had gone to Harvard Law School. There was a Duke Law graduate. Many of them had gone to top law schools and had in fact been associates in firms before ending up in this non-promotional class. I lost the lawsuit. I lost miserably. Something like 98% of the employment discrimination cases are lost. So that was, I did it to bring attention to this issue. And I did it because I am what you call a data person. I want to see the numbers, and it's virtually impossible to see law firm numbers. However, there were, in addition to suing Georgetown, at this time I started talking to my other colleagues, other people I graduated from law school with, and asking them what their experiences were. And I got the idea to track our class. So there were 62 of us. I went and I contacted everyone. I found them all, thanks to LinkedIn, Facebook, social media. At the time, I started tracking them in 2008. And at that time, I was able to find almost everyone. And so this is what the class looks like. And I have, if you look at the list to the right, I have them listed in sort of prestige economic order. And so before I go any further, I'm just curious, I want to play a little game with you. So if we say, if we look at this clockwise, and we say from 12 to 3, so it's 12 to 3, that's where the chunk of the high earning jobs are. Those are the ones that you'll see on those graduates will be the ones on the cover of the law school journal, et cetera. And so I want to ask you all, how much do you think, raise your hand if you think the average salary for this group is $200,000 or more. Raise your hand if you think it's at least $200,000. There's some of you who think it's lower than $200,000? Okay, it's at least $200,000. So all hands should be up at this point. How many of you think that it is more than $300,000? Okay, how many of you think it's more than $400,000? Okay, how many of you think it's $500,000 or more? Okay, how many of you think it's $1 million? Okay, so for big law, which is corporate large law firms, AM Law 300, the average salary for a partner is somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million plus, depending on whether you're equity, non-equity, whether you're practicing in New York, or whether you're in a regional firm like Bradley, which is a large firm but based in the South, so lower cost of living, etc. So this is when it gets interesting. So about a quarter of our class, they have secured those prestige jobs. We have a judge, we have several partners, and we have those who are in corporate counsel or they're executives in a corporation, but they tracked from being a lawyer. So this next group are government attorneys, solo practitioners, public defenders. That's another, say, 30 to 40% of the class. Okay, raise your hand if you think that group makes, on average, $100,000. Okay, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. Okay, no one in this second group very few make more than $175,000. And many of them are making a little bit lower, but as I go into each of them individually, you'll get a better sense of this. So the next chunk are people who are not attorneys. They are people who are in policy positions where I think they call it law degree may be preferred. So for example, I, as a head of Lawyers of Color, as a journalist, as a researcher, I am more in the policy group. That could range from, there are also people in the policy group who work for large nonprofits like NAACP and the like. That group, and then there's a group of people who are either unemployed or went in a totally different direction. And what those people make and how those people's trajectory, how it dovetails with the traditional established legal careers is really interesting. So these are the other salaries. If you want to take a minute and look at it, this is how all of the salaries break out. And what we hear, what we're bombarded with, is what the first quarter are doing. But the vast majority of people who went to my school, at the time a top 15 law school, for the first year ever, we were dropped out of the first 15. I believe we're ranked 16 and heads are rolling. So we'll start with the first group. There are 5 graduates from my class of 62. There are 5 partners in big law firms. 7.9% of the class. Here was their track. So attrition is really, really important. Earlier, 22 graduates ended up getting those traditional tracks where you work as a summer associate and you get offered to come and work for the firm after you graduate. There were 22. 5, how does the song go? Many didn't make it. 5 made it. How did they make it? Everyone has a different story. So the first person here, Darren Skinner, who's a partner in the Washington D.C. office of Arnold Porter. Darren graduated was one of 2 black people to graduate Order of the Court in our law school class. So you think if you get the best grades, you're going to make it. You put everything in your favor. Well, the second graduate, the only other black person to graduate with honors, he was in the original 22. He went to Skadden, which many consider to be the top law firm in the nation. He went to work as an associate there. But he has been since 2014 invisible. When he left Skadden, he was unemployed for several years. He had a health issue. He didn't find the support that he needed in the firm. He started doing contract legal work, the same thing that I was doing when I first figured out that I was in fact not the next Maya Angelou. So there are no guarantees even with the best grades. The second person is Solomon Hunter, and Solomon is a bit like Doug Minor. They both went back to their hometowns. Solomon hadn't been a traditional student. He was slightly older. He'd had a career in sales, and so he knew how to bring in business, and that is a big key. When people think they want to be a lawyer, you think if you're smart, you can write and you can be analytical, but the truth is most top lawyers, particularly if you're going to be in a firm, it's a business, and it is about whether or not you can bring in business. Do you have that personality? Solomon had that personality. Doug went back. He didn't try to make partner in D.C. or New York. He went back to his hometown. He went back to where his father had been an attorney, where his family had a reputation, where he was respected in the community, where he wasn't competing with, thousands of other top law school graduates. He went back to Jackson, Mississippi, and became a star. Carter DeLorme was another alternative student. He actually graduated in the evening. He went into politics and then pivoted back into a law firm when he could demonstrate. They knew that with him would come city contracts, etc. Patrice Talbot she started at a very small law firm. She had done social justice work, gone to work for a law firm, a small firm, started doing work with the city trying to get bonds. Her firm, it was by chance, her firm got bought out by a mid-sized firm, and then that firm got bought out by a large firm. So there are lots of different ways to end up, but the truth is very few, in the aggregate, very few actually become attorneys. A part of that 22 were people who it was too hot in the kitchen in the law firm, and even though they were being successful in the law firm, they decided to go and work in-house because the environment in in-house counsel is much more comfortable for people of color. And it's not that we are shrinking violence, it is because in a corporate environment, you have a human resources department that is serious about essentially, a law firm is, for however many partners you have that many business owners. And very few people have more power than the other. And so you can't make decisions collectively about, you can't make partner X give business to someone who, for whatever reason, he doesn't think can do the work, or someone who doesn't remind him of his son or daughter. You can't make that partner give work to a young minority associate. But in a corporate environment, people are more sophisticated, it's more diverse to start with, and they are more interested, it's not so personal. So Ernest Tuckett is our great success story. Ernest was a partner. He had a career I wish for all of you. He went to work for a large law firm after law school. He was mentored by one of the first black general counsel of a Fortune 500 company, really probably Fortune 10 company. His mentor became general counsel of DuPont, and he recruited Ernest to come over and work in-house counsel. And eventually Ernest became general counsel of DuPont Canada, and now he is general counsel of the American division of a painting company called Akzo Nobel, which is, it's a company I'd never heard of, but in fact, it is a company that supplies paint, industrial material, et cetera, for some of the largest companies and building in the country. So our next group, we have one attorney. She's a state attorney. Shannon Friesen. She was appointed by the first black governor of Massachusetts, Governor Deval Patrick, and this is when having people in place who you have networked with, because that's what it's about. It is about reputations. It's about people being able to see you and recognize you. And so Shannon's had a wonderful career, but I will tell you, before Shannon Shannon went to Georgetown Law, but she went to Harvard undergrad. And her career trajectory was she wanted to be in JAG Corps, in military legal corps, when she graduated, and so she joined the Marines. So she did her designated time in the Marines. She went back to her hometown. She went back to Boston, which, by the way, going to your hometowns, that is not half the battle, but statistically, that works in people's favor. She went home. She started working for a large firm. She didn't like that. She went to work for a mid-sized firm, and she found her way. She made the active decision that I want to be a judge, and she set out to position herself to do that. So the next group, mid-sized attorneys, government agency attorneys, solo practice, those folk are pretty much, these are people who all sort of win it alone. These are people who decided, I'm not comfortable being in an environment where my livelihood is dependent on other folk making decisions for me. And so these are people who, in a government agency, it's you can find your lane. It's less likely that you'll be fired without justification. there's a lot of job security. The same is not true for solo practitioners. You can have a year where you get a big case and you win a multi-million-dollar settlement, and you can have years where you are, barely bringing in revenue of, 6 figures. So again, it depends on what kind of person you are, how you're able to sell, how you're able to budget your time, manage your staff. There are only so many hours in a day. How many clients can you service? Are you a good manager? Do you know how to hire people, train people, etc.? So all of that comes into play. The public defender is an interesting group. We only have 2 public defenders, 2 people who have been career public defenders. On the flip side, about half of the people in our Georgetown law class were interested in going into public interest law, particularly the criminal justice system, at the beginning of the process. And the question becomes, to piggyback on what was said earlier, the question becomes, what's your why? Right? What is your why? And because of essentially the low salaries, the heavy caseloads, many people wanted to be able to stay in the public defender space, but they just couldn't do it. With a family, they couldn't afford it. And one of our graduates, she even said, I had to take a second job because I couldn't, after I paid the portion of my student loans and my rent, I couldn't pay my cable bill. So it is not all glamour. Doing that work is costly. When I was interviewing each of the law graduates, I asked a few of them who had worked in firms and who hadn't been able to become partner, like what they thought, what were some of the key takeaways. And one of the graduates said to me, who, he had gone to West Point undergraduate. His father had been the head of the national NAACP. Like he seemed to have all the pieces in place. And he said that he found that it was just when you make a mistake, as all lawyers do, in a law firm environment for people of color, you are penalized more when you make a mistake than others. And the truth is, everyone is going to make a mistake. So if you don't have someone in your corner who can look at you and remember the mistake they made, who can look at you and remember, something familiar to them and be empathetic, that becomes the thing that gives them the reason to say no. It is no different than grades. Grades are important, but when I sued Covington and Berlin, it became very interesting. It was interesting that there were 2 associates in the firm who had started out as contract attorneys, who ended up being promoted to the staff attorney group. And neither of those attorneys had outstanding grades. And neither of those attorneys had gone to top law schools, but they were both white men. And so don't think that exceptions aren't made, but those exceptions aren't made for you. And so what happens is, anything that you do, it ends up being a reason to say no. Another key point was that the money. So as I said, at a certain point, there were 22 graduates who were in law firms. Of those 22, one graduate who left, and you start on this decline where you were at the large law firm, then you go to the mid-sized law firm, and then you're at a small law firm. And all this time, oftentimes even entry-level large law firm associates are making more than, say, a person with 20 years of experience as a solo practitioner. And what he said to me was, if my wife and I, his wife had also been an associate, he said, if my wife and I had known in 1998 that the $400,000 we were earning would be the most we had ever earned, we would have made different decisions. We wouldn't have, splurged on the summer place in Fire Island. We wouldn't have taken, all of the extravagant vacations that we took. We would have made different decisions if we had known that was going to be the only money we ever made. We would have paid off those student loans. And so I say that to say, for those of you who are lucky enough, fortunate enough to get those positions, take care of your financial lives, because it will be, our financial situation is not the financial situation of most, particularly if you go to a top law school. Most of your white peers will have law school paid for by either by their parents, by a grandparent who died and they sold, or they took out a second mortgage on the grandparents' home and paid for their kids' law school that way. It might be bar mitzvah. Like, these are not, like, I'm not pulling these out of a hat. These are people that I know, that I knew in law school, and this is how they pay for law school. I, on the other hand, am from a working class family, and I had to take out over $100,000 of student loans to pay for law school. So always be mindful of your financial future as well. So having said that, I think we want to encourage you to go to law school. If you have a desire to be a lawyer, that's great. But I don't think we spend enough time talking about the possibility that maybe there's some other passion you have, and that you think that the law is the best path or the most direct path to getting to this other thing that you really want to do, when in fact it might behoove you to just go to this other thing. So for example, in our class, there were 5 people who, right out of law school, took very different roads. So Colette Shelton had, before she went to law school, she had been a TV anchor, and she knew that she wanted to go to television. She wanted to go into television. After law school, first, I don't know why she thought, I don't know what she intended to do with her law degree, but at a certain point, she realized during law school, when I graduate, I'm just going to go back and work as an anchor again. And that's what she did. So she took a job for like $25,000. I believe it was in Las Vegas. But I think it was a Fox affiliate. And she went from being on air to being a producer to working in the national headquarters. And today she is a very high earner. She's a very prestigious graduate. But she never worked as an attorney. She's VP of brand integration and doing very well. Erica Mobley, similar story. Erica had gone to Yale undergrad. She went to law school, and she decided she did an intern at BET and also at a couple of music and television trade organizations in DC, and decided she preferred the business side. And so she took a job at Amazon making like $30,000 right out of law school. She moved to a few other tech companies, and now she is a director at Apple. Terry Mitchell, same thing. She decided she wanted to be a television producer, took a job making less than $20,000 for ABC as an assistant producer. She at the last, right before, she was a senior producer for the Oprah show, and now she has her own production company. Des Bracy, he and his wife decided his wife had the more opportunity. She was in brand management at Procter & Gamble, and he decided, she got pregnant, he decided to be a stay-at-home dad. So for the last 15 years, he's been a stay-at-home dad with a Stanford undergrad degree and a Georgetown law degree, and they've lived, they just came back from living in Switzerland. His wife was head of CoverGirl's international division. So he's had experiences he never would have had he not been open. We also have Allison Tucker, who started law school with our class, and she decided early on, and she wanted to be a dancer. And this is the most unrealistic thing ever. And I mean, you know, it's like, you want to be a dancer, you're going to drop out of law school to be a dancer. And she dropped out of law school. She went and became a dancer on Broadway. And, you know, she's had a great career. She's married to Brian Mitchell, a very successful actor as well. And she has a wonderful life. And, you know, she's personal friends of Barack and Michelle Obama. And very few from my law school class can say that. And so, I just say to you all, you know, please be open, consider all possibilities, because at the end of the day, you only have one life, and you should take every opportunity to ensure that you're living the best life you can. Thank you.